I've now been off work with repetitive strain injury for over a year, and I've had the condition for over 7 years now. I'm not going to talk about my own specific condition today. I'm going to leave that for a future video. But I wanted to talk about a book that I read recently called Explain Pain, and it goes into the kind of modern kind of pain science and how pain is understood today. And I've spoken to pain specialists who have confirmed that yes, this book is kind of accurate in terms of its understanding of pain science and how kind of pain science has moved on. So I think a lot of us kind of have quite a kind of simplistic or kind of outdated view of pain, where we think, for example, say you get stabbed in the arm, we think that a pain signal goes up to the brain and that causes pain. And what the book says, and there's quite a lot to it, and that there's kind of various levels which I'll go into, but the book talks about how we should think of it more in terms of, if you get stabbed in the arm, the danger signal, which in the kind of scientific term is nociception, that signal goes up to the brain, and then the brain decides whether the sensation of pain is the appropriate response to make you change your behaviour to kind of get away from whatever's causing, the danger or whatever. So the brain uses its own kind of experience, of past events to kind of work out whether the signal that it's getting is indeed something that's a problem or not. And one of the authors of the book, Lorimer Moseley, has a video on YouTube which I'll link to, where he talks about something that happened to him a few years back. Just to give you a very brief kind of summary. He was kind of walking through the Australian bush one day and felt a scratch on his leg, and it wasn't particularly painful. It turned out he'd actually been bitten by one of the most venomous snakes in the world and had to be hospitalised and was quite seriously kind of hurt. And then about a year later, again, he was walking through the bush and he felt suddenly a searing pain in his leg, kind of in the same place that he'd been bitten by the snake. But what it turned out that had happened was he'd just been scratched by a twig. So what seemed to be happening there was that, something kind of touched his leg, and the signal went up to the brain, and the brain thought, okay, last time I got this kind of signal from that part of the leg in this same kind of environment, it was really bad, so I'm going to assume it's going to be bad this time because that's my experience, that's kind of informing me. So it kind of shows that your brain's kind of interpretation of the danger signal that comes from the nervous system can be wrong. Another thing the book talks about, which may be of interest to chronic pain sufferers like myself, is that the brain can actually generate pain even if there isn't that kind of danger signal from the peripheral nervous system. So for example, say someone hurt their arm, and every time they do a certain movement they got pain, and that kind of persisted for several weeks or months. The brain may kind of get used to that kind of state and kind of get used to the idea that when you do that action, you get that pain response. And that can actually set it up so that even if the original injury is healed and the danger signal is no longer being sent from the arm, that if you do that action, it's almost kind of ingrained into the brain that when you do this, the response is that pain sensation. So this is a lot of what the book is about, kind of talking about how this kind of knowledge could be useful to people with chronic pain, because I think a lot of people with chronic pain, if they do something that's painful, they'll think, something bad is happening, there's still some injury there, I'm going to feel bad about doing that action, and I'm going to try and avoid doing that action if at all possible. So a lot of what the book is saying is that actually you don't have to be kind of so worried that you're damaging yourself, or, causing further injury by doing a certain activity, and that it is possible, albeit it may be difficult if you've had a condition for a long time, that you can kind of gradually build up your tolerance of the activity and kind of teach your brain that actually it's okay. But there is a lot more to the book, and I definitely recommend reading it. It's quite expensive, it was £55, but I think to get a kind of better understanding of the science of pain, it's not only interesting, but it's also kind of relevant potentially to people like myself. I'll just go very briefly into some of the other kind of mechanisms that the book talks about in terms of how kind of pain can be generated or kind of modulated by the brain and the nervous system. So for example, there are multiple different ways in which you can actually become more or less sensitive to pain depending on your situation. So for example, if you've suffered pain in a particular part of your body or various places for a long period of time, your brain may actually your brain and your nervous system may kind of actually turn up the signal to say, okay, like something's going on, let's kind of pay attention to that, and in that way actually pain can kind of be made to persist over time, and even kind of small kind of signals from the nerves may be kind of interpreted out of proportion to their real kind of actual level. There's also a way in which the brain can tell the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, which is like basically everything outside of the spinal cord, to actually kind of damp down the signal and say, okay, I'm getting this kind of danger signal, but I don't think it's really an issue, so just don't let me know about that. And this could explain kind of quite a few phenomena, including potentially the placebo effects, and things like you hear about soldiers on the battlefield having their arm blown off and barely even feeling anything, and that may be a case of the brain saying, okay, we're in a dangerous situation, you just got to focus on survival and we'll worry about that later. So that's Explain Pain. It's by David Butler and Lorimer Moseley, and they're part of a group called the Neuro-Orthopedic Institute, so I recommend having a look at their website. I definitely recommend getting this book, and make sure you get the second edition, because obviously that'll be more up to date, or if you're reading this in the far future, then get whatever edition is most up to date. There's also a book called Painful Yarns, which both of these books are kind of pretty readable by people without a lot of kind of scientific knowledge, but Painful Yarns is aimed more at people without kind of any scientific knowledge, and it's more about kind of specific pain stories which illustrate the kind of concepts that these people are talking about. Painful Yarns is cheaper and it's available as an ebook, which may be an option for you if it's not kind of readily available in whatever country you're in. So I said I'd kind of leave talking about my own condition and how that relates to this for another day, but I do have kind of one thought that I'd like to briefly mention. So this book is obviously called Explain Pain, and it's talking about pain sensations. In my own condition, pain kind of in the normal sense isn't the number one issue. Most of the time my symptoms are more like a kind of tingling or kind of sub-tingling, and I'm kind of left a bit wondering to what extent do these lessons apply to that kind of symptom. And the answer is a bit kind of up in the air for me. I do think it's quite likely that these kind of symptoms could also kind of become persistent due to some of the mechanisms talked about in this book. If anyone's got any thoughts on that, then leave a comment. Thanks. P.S. I'm going to try and do another video soon talking about my own kind of condition and how I'm trying to apply some of the lessons from the Explain Pain book and trying to kind of think about how the book may or may not apply to me. So hopefully I'll do that in a reasonable amount of time and not take about 3 months, which I normally do.